The door flew open with such force that the family photos on the hallway wall rattled. Mark Winters stood frozen, his 5-year-old daughter Emma hiding behind his legs, both staring at the woman on their doorstep. Her face was flushed, hair disheveled from the autumn wind, and her eyes, those usually calm, professional eyes, blazed with an intensity he'd never seen before. "You're fired, Mark," she shouted, her voice cracking slightly. "Do you hear me? Fired." What happened next would change everything. If you're wondering how a single dad's worst nightmare turned into the most unexpected blessing, stick around. This story might just remind you that sometimes life's harshest moments lead to our greatest happiness. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to catch more incredible stories of life's unexpected turns. 3 months earlier, Mark Winters was drowning. Not in water, but in the overwhelming responsibility of raising a child alone while trying to keep his career afloat. His desk at Meridian Publishing was always the messiest, his tie perpetually crooked, and dark circles had become a permanent feature beneath his once bright blue eyes. "Daddy, is my lunch ready?" Emma called from the living room where cartoons played at a volume just loud enough to wake the neighbors. "Almost, sweetheart." Mark called back, frantically spreading peanut butter on bread while simultaneously trying to iron his shirt with one hand. The clock on the microwave blinked 7:42 a.m. They were already running late. Again. Since Diane's death 2 years ago, mornings had become a chaotic race against time. Mark had never imagined raising their daughter alone. He'd never imagined a lot of things, like how difficult it would be to explain to a 3-year-old why mommy wasn't coming home from the hospital, or how to braid hair, or what to do when Emma cried for her mother in the middle of the night. "Your sandwich is ready, Em. Come eat while I finish getting dressed," he called, tucking his half-ironed shirt into his pants. Emma appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair a tangled mess, still in her pajamas. "I don't want peanut butter today. I want what Lily brings to school. The fancy sandwich with the little stars." Mark closed his eyes briefly. "Emma, we don't have time for this. Please, just eat your sandwich." "But Daddy." "Emma." His voice came out sharper than intended, and immediately her bottom lip began to tremble. Guilt washed over him. He knelt down, pulling her into a hug. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Daddy's just in a hurry. How about tomorrow we make star sandwiches together? I promise." She nodded against his shoulder, and he felt the familiar ache in his chest, the one that appeared whenever he fell short of being both parents to her. 20 minutes later, they rushed into Little Sprout's daycare, Emma's hair hastily pulled into an uneven ponytail, her backpack half-zipped. "Mr. Winters, could I have a quick word?" Ms. Jenkins, Emma's teacher, approached with a sympathetic smile that immediately set off alarm bells in Mark's head. "I'm actually running late for work. It'll just take a moment." Her tone left no room for negotiation. Emma's been having some trouble during sharing time. She gets upset when the other children talk about activities with their mothers. Mark's heart sank. "I see. And yesterday she mentioned that you forgot to read her bedtime story 3 nights in a row." The guilt that had been his constant companion since Diane's death intensified. "I've been working late on a big project. I'll make it up to her." Ms. Jenkins nodded, her expression kind but concerned. "Children need consistency, Mr. Winters. Perhaps you could look into some additional support? Many single parents find that." "We're managing fine," Mark interrupted, checking his watch. "I really have to go. Thank you for letting me know." As he rushed to his car, Ms. Jenkins' words echoed in his mind. Additional support. As if he hadn't thought of that. But babysitters were expensive, his parents lived across the country, and Diane's family had never approved of him in the first place. Besides, he was Emma's father. He should be able to handle this. By the time Mark arrived at Meridian Publishing, he was 23 minutes late. He slipped into the morning meeting as quietly as possible, but not quietly enough. "Nice of you to join us, Mark," said Catherine Reynolds, the company's new editorial director. She'd taken over the department just 3 months ago, and in that time, Mark had managed to be late to nearly every meeting. "Sorry," he mumbled, sliding into an empty chair and avoiding the sympathetic glances from his colleagues. Everyone knew his situation. Everyone except Catherine, apparently, who continued the meeting without acknowledging his apology. Catherine Reynolds was everything Mark was not: organized, punctual, and seemingly effortlessly put together. Her dark hair was always perfectly styled, her clothes immaculate, and her presentations flawless. At 35, she was the youngest editorial director in the company's history, and rumors about her demanding standards had preceded her arrival. "As I was saying," she continued, "the Wilson manuscript needs significant revisions before we can move forward. Mark, since you're the assigned editor, I'd like a complete analysis on my desk by tomorrow morning." Mark's stomach dropped. The Wilson manuscript was over 500 pages. Tomorrow morning? I was planning to have it done by the end of the week. Catherine's green eyes fixed on him. "The timeline has been accelerated. The author is anxious to move forward. But I have 3 other projects I'm juggling, Anne." "We're all juggling multiple projects, Mark," she interrupted, her tone professional but firm. 9 o'clock tomorrow. Now, moving on to the marketing strategy for the spring releases. Mark spent the rest of the meeting frantically calculating how he could possibly complete the analysis by morning. He'd have to work through the night, which meant finding someone to watch Emma. His neighbor Mrs. Patel had helped in emergencies before, but she was visiting her daughter this week. He could try calling the teenage girl down the street, but last time she'd let Emma stay up until midnight watching inappropriate movies. As the meeting dispersed, Catherine called out, "Mark, a moment please." He approached her desk, bracing himself. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice softer than it had been during the meeting. The question caught him off guard. "Yes, of course." "Why? This is the 4th meeting you've been late to this week. Your last 3 reports had errors that shouldn't have made it past a first draft, and you missed the deadline for the Peterson proposal entirely." Mark felt heat rising to his face. "I've been dealing with some personal matters, but it won't affect my work moving forward." Catherine studied him for a moment. "Mark, I understand that everyone has personal lives outside of work. But when those personal matters consistently impact your performance, it becomes a professional concern." "It won't happen again," he said stiffly. "I hope not." She hesitated, then added, "If you need to adjust your workload temporarily." "I don't," he interrupted. "I can handle it." Something flickered across her face, disappointment, perhaps, or frustration. "Very well. 9 o'clock tomorrow, then." Mark nodded and turned to leave, his mind already racing through impossible solutions to his predicament. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings, phone calls, and frantic attempts to catch up on overdue work. By 5 o'clock, Mark had made barely a dent in the Wilson manuscript analysis, and his inbox was overflowing with unread emails. His phone buzzed with a text from Little Sprouts: "Reminder, late pickup fees apply after 5:30 p.m. Mark cursed under his breath. He'd have to leave now to make it in time, which meant taking the manuscript home to work on after Emma went to bed. If she went to bed on time. If she didn't have a meltdown about missing her mother. If he didn't fall asleep on the couch from sheer exhaustion before finishing. As he was packing up his laptop, Catherine appeared in his doorway. "Heading out?" she asked, glancing at the clock. "I have to pick up my daughter," he explained, not meeting her eyes. "But I'll finish the analysis tonight." "Your daughter," she repeated, as if this was new information. "How old is she?" 5. Catherine nodded slowly. "And her mother?" "Died 2 years ago," Mark said, the words still painful to speak aloud. "Car accident." Something in Catherine's expression softened. "I'm sorry to hear that. It must be difficult." Mark shrugged, uncomfortable with her sympathy. We manage. I'm sure you do. She hesitated, then said, the analysis can wait until the end of the week, as originally planned. Mark looked up, surprised. But you said. I know what I said. But I think in this case, quality is more important than speed. Take the time you need to do it properly. Relief washed over him. Thank you. She nodded once, then turned to leave before pausing. Mark? Yes? If you're struggling to balance everything, there's no shame in asking for help. Before he could respond, she was gone, leaving him to wonder if her words had been meant as kindness or criticism. The next few weeks followed a similar pattern. Mark would arrive late, miss deadlines, or submit work that fell short of expectations, and Catherine would call him into her office for what he'd begun to think of as the talk. Each time, her approach varied slightly, sometimes stern, sometimes understanding, occasionally offering accommodations like extended deadlines or redistributed workloads. What Mark failed to notice was that Catherine was trying, in her own way, to help him. The hints were there, suggestions about flexible working hours, mentions of the company's family support programs, even casual comments about her nephew who had recently started kindergarten and how her sister managed as a working parent. But Mark, drowning in his own struggles and pride, interpreted her actions as pity at best and criticism at worst. He didn't want special treatment. He wanted to prove, to himself, to Emma, to the memory of Diane, that he could do this on his own. One rainy Tuesday in October, everything came to a head. Mark had stayed up until 3 a.m. finishing a crucial presentation, only to oversleep and rush Emma to daycare without breakfast. When he finally arrived at work, soaking wet and 40 minutes late, the meeting had already ended. They're waiting for you in conference room B, his assistant informed him nervously. Ms. Reynolds asked me to send you in as soon as you arrived. Mark hurried to the conference room, his wet shoes squeaking on the polished floor. Inside, Catherine sat with the company's biggest client, Howard Bergman, and 2 members of his team. Ah, Mr. Winters, Bergman said, checking his watch pointedly. We were beginning to think you'd forgotten about us. I apologize for the delay, Mark said, setting up his laptop with trembling hands. There was a situation with my daughter this morning. Catherine's expression remained neutral, but he could sense her disappointment. Mr. Bergman was just sharing some concerns about the direction of their new campaign. The meeting was a disaster from start to finish. Mark's presentation had several outdated figures that Catherine had to correct on the spot. He fumbled through explanations, lost his train of thought multiple times, and at one point, his phone rang loudly, Little Sprouts Daycare calling to inform him that Emma had developed a fever and needed to be picked up immediately. By the time Bergman and his team left, promising to consider their options, which everyone knew was corporate speak for, "We're taking our business elsewhere," Mark felt physically ill. My office. Now, Catherine said, her voice tight with controlled anger. Mark followed her silently, already mentally updating his resume. This was it. He was going to be fired, and then how would he support Emma? How would he pay for their apartment, her daycare, the medical bills still lingering from Diane's final days? Catherine closed her office door and took a deep breath before turning to face him. Mark, this can't continue. I know. I'm sorry about today. It won't happen again, she finished for him. That's what you said last time, and the time before that. We just lost our biggest client because you couldn't be bothered to double-check your own presentation or arrive on time. That's not fair, Mark protested. I was up all night working on that presentation. My daughter was sick this morning, and that's precisely my point, Catherine interrupted. Your personal circumstances are affecting your professional performance to an unacceptable degree. Mark felt a surge of anger. So what am I supposed to do? Abandon my daughter? She's already lost her mother. She needs me. Of course she needs you, Catherine said, her voice softening slightly. But she needs you at your best, not exhausted and stretched too thin. I'm doing the best I can, Mark said, hating the defensive note in his voice. Catherine studied him for a long moment. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to do everything alone, and failing at most of it. The words hit Mark like a physical blow. That's the truth, she finished firmly. Mark, I've tried to help you. I've offered flexible hours, reduced workloads, even suggested our employee assistance program that could help with childcare options. But you've rejected every offer. I don't need charity, he said stiffly. It's not charity to acknowledge when you need help, Catherine countered. It's human. And it's what any good parent would do for their child. Mark fell silent, her words striking too close to home. Catherine sighed. I'm putting you on probation. 2 weeks to demonstrate significant improvement, or we'll have to reconsider your position here. You can't do that, Mark said, panic rising. I need this job. My daughter needs a father who isn't constantly on the verge of collapse, Catherine finished. 2 weeks, Mark. Use them wisely. He left her office in a daze, collected his things, and headed to Little Sprouts to pick up Emma. Her small face was flushed with fever, her eyes bright with tears as she clung to him. Daddy, I don't feel good, she whimpered. I know, sweetheart, he murmured, carrying her to the car. Daddy's going to take care of you. But as he buckled her into her car seat, he wondered how much longer he could keep that promise. The next 2 weeks were a blur of desperate attempts to improve his performance at work while caring for Emma, who had developed a persistent ear infection that kept her home from daycare for several days. Mark called in favors from acquaintances, paid a fortune for last-minute babysitters, and survived on coffee and determination. He arrived early to meetings, double-checked all his work, and stayed late to catch up on backlogged projects. But each time he thought he was making progress, something would happen. Emma would spike a fever in the middle of the night, the babysitter would cancel at the last minute, or he would simply hit the wall of exhaustion that had been building for 2 years. Catherine watched his efforts with an unreadable expression. Sometimes, he caught her studying him with what almost looked like concern, but she maintained a professional distance that made it clear his probation was serious. On the final day of his probation period, Mark arrived at work to find an email from Catherine requesting a meeting at the end of the day. His stomach knotted with dread. Despite his best efforts, he knew he hadn't demonstrated the significant improvement she'd demanded. Just yesterday, he'd missed an important client call because Emma's school had called about her ear pain returning. Throughout the day, Mark tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept returning to the impending meeting. What would he do if he lost his job? How would he tell Emma they might have to move to a smaller apartment, or that she couldn't go to Little Sprouts anymore? By 5 o'clock, his nerves were frayed to breaking point. He knocked on Catherine's door with a hand that wasn't quite steady. Come in, she called. Mark entered to find her reviewing a document, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She gestured for him to sit while she finished reading. Finally, she removed her glasses and looked at him directly. Mark, I've been observing your performance over these past 2 weeks. I know I've had some setbacks, he began, but I'm committed to. Let me finish, she interrupted gently. I've seen your efforts. I've also seen how those efforts are taking a toll on both you and, I suspect, your daughter. Mark fell silent, waiting for the inevitable. I spoke with HR this morning, Catherine continued. We've created a new position that I think might be better suited to your current circumstances. Mark blinked in surprise. A new position? A remote editorial consultant role. You'd work primarily from home, coming into the office only for essential meetings. The salary would be slightly reduced to reflect the decreased hours, but your benefits would remain intact. Mark stared at her, struggling to process what she was saying. You're not firing me? That depends, Catherine said, leaning forward. I'm offering you an alternative that might allow you to be both the father and the professional you want to be. But if you're too proud to accept it." She let the sentence hang. For the first time in 2 years, Mark felt something loosen in his chest, a knot of tension he'd carried for so long he'd forgotten it was there. "Why would you do this?" he asked quietly. Catherine's expression softened. "Because you're a talented editor, Mark. And because I watched my sister struggle as a single parent after her divorce. I know what it costs." Mark swallowed hard. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll consider it," Catherine replied. "Take the weekend to think about it. We can discuss details on Monday." That night, as Mark tucked Emma into bed, her ear infection finally improving, he found himself actually present in the moment rather than mentally cataloging all the work waiting for him after she fell asleep. "Daddy, are you still sad?" Emma asked, her small hand reaching up to touch his face. "What do you mean, sweetheart? You look sad all the time. Like when Mommy went to heaven." Mark's heart constricted. Had he been so transparent? "I'm not sad, Em. Just tired sometimes." "Mrs. Jenkins says it's okay to ask for help when things are hard," Emma said solemnly. "Like when I couldn't tie my shoes, and Lily showed me how." Out of the mouths of babes. Mark smiled and kissed her forehead. "Mrs. Jenkins is very smart." Over the weekend, Mark did something he hadn't done in a long time. He reflected honestly on his life. The remote position would mean more time with Emma, less rushing, less stress. It would mean admitting he couldn't do it all alone, but maybe that wasn't such a terrible thing to admit. By Monday morning, his decision was made. He accepted Catherine's offer with a gratitude that surprised them both. The transition wasn't seamless. There were adjustments, learning curves, and moments of doubt. But for the first time since Diane's death, Mark felt like he could breathe. He was present for Emma's bedtime stories every night. He could attend her school events without panic. And his work, freed from the constant pressure of trying to be in 2 places at once, actually improved. Catherine checked in regularly, offering guidance and support that gradually evolved into a genuine professional respect. Sometimes, when she called to discuss a manuscript, their conversations would drift to parenting challenges or Emma's latest accomplishments. 6 months after accepting the remote position, Mark invited the team to Emma's 6th birthday party, a small gathering at their apartment with princess decorations and a lopsided homemade cake. To his surprise, Catherine arrived with a beautifully wrapped gift and an ease with children he hadn't expected. "She looks like you," Catherine observed as they watched Emma showing her friends how to play a game. "But I bet her personality comes from her mother." "How did you know?" Mark asked, smiling. "Just a guess. You're too methodical to have produced a child who insists on wearing mismatched socks for good luck." They both laughed, and Mark realized it was the first time he'd spoken about Diane with someone new without feeling that crushing weight of grief. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Catherine lingered, helping to clean up despite Mark's protests. "You don't have to do that," he insisted as she gathered paper plates. "I know," she replied simply. "I want to." Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, something neither was quite ready to name but both recognized. "Thank you," Mark said quietly. "Not just for helping with the party. For everything." Catherine smiled. "You're welcome. Though I should warn you, I expect that manuscript analysis by Friday." "Yes, boss," he replied with a mock salute. As Catherine prepared to leave, Emma ran up and hugged her impulsively. "Thank you for my book, Miss Catherine. Daddy says you're the reason he can read me stories every night now." Catherine looked surprised, then touched. "Did he?" "Uh-huh. He says you're the smartest lady he knows, even if you're bossy sometimes." "Emma!" Mark exclaimed, mortified. Catherine laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her usually composed features. "Well, your daddy is right about that. I am bossy sometimes. But that's okay, Emma said seriously. Daddy says bossy people get things done. Your daddy is a wise man, Catherine replied, her eyes meeting Mark's over Emma's head. After Catherine left, Mark found himself thinking about the way she'd fit so naturally into their home, how Emma had taken to her immediately, and how the professional distance between them had gradually given way to something warmer. Weeks passed, and their working relationship continued to evolve. Catherine began stopping by occasionally to drop off manuscripts in person rather than sending them electronically. Mark found reasons to come into the office more frequently than strictly necessary. They developed a friendship that both valued but neither quite understood. Then came the day of the company's annual holiday party. Mark had arranged for Mrs. Patel to watch Emma, determined to make an appearance and show his appreciation for the accommodation that had changed his life. He wore his best suit, actually ironed properly for once, and even got a haircut. The venue was decorated elegantly, with twinkling lights and tasteful holiday decorations. Mark mingled with colleagues, many of whom commented on how well he looked, the dark circles gone, the perpetual tension in his shoulders eased. He was at the bar getting a drink when Catherine appeared beside him, stunning in a deep green dress that matched her eyes. You clean up nicely, Winters, she said with a smile. Almost didn't recognize you without a child attached to your leg or papers spilling out of your arms. I could say the same about you, he replied. Though you always look. He trailed off, suddenly aware of crossing some invisible line. I always look what? She prompted, her smile widening. Professional, he finished lamely. Catherine laughed. What a compliment. I'm flattered. They fell into easy conversation, moving to a quiet corner away from the main crowd. For the first time, they talked not as boss and employee but as two people getting to know each other. Catherine told him about growing up with 4 siblings, her brief disastrous marriage in her 20s, and her passion for rock climbing. Mark shared stories about meeting Diane in college, their dreams before her illness, and Emma's latest obsession with marine biology. She made me read the same book about octopuses every night for 2 weeks, he said, smiling at the memory. I know more about cephalopod intelligence than any grown man should. She sounds remarkable, Catherine said. You're doing a wonderful job with her, you know. I'm trying, Mark admitted. It's getting easier, especially since. He gestured between them. Since you gave me a chance to find a better balance. Catherine's expression grew serious. Can I tell you something? When I first took over the department, HR gave me your file with a note suggesting you might need to be managed out due to performance issues. Mark winced. That bad, huh? On paper, yes. But then I met you, and I could see you were drowning, not failing. There's a difference. She took a sip of her wine. I recognized it because I watched my sister go through something similar after her divorce. Too proud to ask for help, trying to prove she could do it all. What happened with your sister? She crashed. Literally, fell asleep driving and wrapped her car around a tree. She was okay, thankfully, but it was the wake-up call she needed. Catherine met his eyes. I didn't want to wait for your wake-up call to be something that couldn't be fixed. The weight of what she'd done for him, what could have happened if she hadn't, settled over Mark. I never properly thanked you. You don't need to thank me. Just keep being the father Emma needs and the editor I know you can be. As the evening progressed, something shifted between them. Their conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and moments of surprising connection. When Catherine mentioned needing to leave, Mark found himself offering to walk her to her car. In the cold December air, standing beside her vehicle, Mark struggled to find the right words. I've enjoyed tonight, he finally said. Talking with you. Outside of work, I mean. So have I, Catherine replied, her breath visible in the cold. Maybe we could do it again sometime? I'd like that, Mark said, surprised by how much he meant it. Catherine smiled, then hesitated before reaching up to straighten his slightly crooked tie. Old habits, she murmured. The gesture, simple as it was, broke something open in Mark, a door he'd kept firmly closed since Diane's death. Without overthinking, he leaned down and kissed Catherine gently. For a moment, she responded, her hand still resting on his tie. Then she pulled back, her expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," Mark said immediately. "That was inappropriate. You're my boss, and I—" "Mark," she interrupted. "It's not that. It's just complicated. For both of us." He nodded, embarrassment washing over him. "Of course. I understand." "Do you?" she asked softly. "Because I'm not sure I do. I care about you, Mark. And about Emma. But I don't want to be a replacement or a solution." "You're not," he said firmly. "You're Catherine. And that's enough." She studied his face for a long moment, then smiled slightly. "We should probably take this slowly. For everyone's sake." "Slowly," he agreed. "I can do slowly." As Catherine drove away, Mark stood in the parking lot feeling something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not just for survival, but for happiness. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of professional boundaries and personal connection. Catherine and Mark maintained their working relationship during office hours, but began spending time together outside of work, sometimes with Emma, sometimes alone when Mrs. Patel was available to babysit. Emma, with a child's intuition, sensed the change immediately. "Do you like Ms. Catherine, Daddy?" she asked one night as he tucked her in. "Yes, I do," he answered honestly. "Is that okay with you?" Emma considered this seriously. "Does she make you happy?" "She does." "Then it's okay," Emma decided. "But she has to know that Mommy is still our angel watching over us." Mark's throat tightened. "She knows that, sweetheart. No one could ever replace your mom." "I know," Emma said, yawning. "But maybe Ms. Catherine could be like Lily's stepmom. Lily says having two moms is better than one because she gets twice the hugs." Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. As winter turned to spring, Mark and Catherine's relationship deepened. They moved cautiously, both aware of the complexities involved: her position as his superior at work, his status as a widower still healing, Emma's need for stability. But beneath the complications was something genuine and increasingly difficult to deny. One evening in April, nearly a year after Catherine had put Mark on probation, they sat on his small balcony after Emma had gone to bed. The night was warm, stars visible despite the city lights. "I have something to tell you," Catherine said, her expression serious. Mark felt a flicker of anxiety. "That sounds ominous." "It's not. At least, I hope not." She took a deep breath. "I've been offered a position as publishing director at Westfield Books." "Catherine, that's amazing!" Mark exclaimed. "It's what you've been working toward for years." "It is," she agreed. "And I've decided to take it." Mark felt a complicated mix of emotions: happiness for her achievement, sadness at the thought of not working with her daily, and a selfish relief that their relationship would no longer involve professional complications. "When do you start?" he asked. "Next month." "But that's not all I wanted to discuss." Catherine turned to face him fully. "This changes things between us. Professionally, obviously, but personally too." Mark nodded. "I know. We won't have to be careful at work anymore. No more worrying about conflicts of interest or office gossip." She paused. "But it also means we need to decide what this is, Mark. What we want it to be." The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. "I know what I want," Mark said quietly. "I want you in my life. In Emma's life. Not as my boss, but as Catherine." She smiled at the echo of his words from months ago. Just Catherine? Catherine who challenges me. Who doesn't let me hide behind excuses. Who sees me at my worst and still believes in my best. He took her hand. Catherine who I'm falling in love with, if I'm being completely honest. Her eyes widened slightly at his admission. That's quite a job description. The benefits are terrible, he warned with a smile. You'd have to deal with a sometimes stubborn single dad and a 6-year-old who will quiz you relentlessly about octopus facts. Catherine laughed, then grew serious. I've never done this before, Mark. Been with someone who has a child. It scares me, not because of Emma, who I adore, but because I know how much is at stake. For all of us. It scares me too, he admitted. Letting someone new into our lives. Opening up that possibility again. So we're both terrified, Catherine summarized. That seems like a solid foundation. Mark smiled. Or maybe it just means we both understand how precious this could be. Catherine leaned forward and kissed him softly. I'm willing to find out if you are. 6 months later, on a crisp October day, Catherine stood on Mark's doorstep, the same doorstep where their story had truly begun. But this time, she wasn't there to fire him. She was there to help Emma carve pumpkins for Halloween, having promised the little girl she'd teach her how to make the scariest jack-o'-lantern on the block. Before she could knock, the door flew open, and Emma launched herself into Catherine's arms. You're late, the child accused, though she was smiling. Daddy said you'd be here at 3, and it's already 3:05. My sincerest apologies, Catherine said solemnly. Traffic was terrible. Will you ever forgive me? Emma pretended to consider this. Only if you help me make my pumpkin have fire coming out of its eyes like you promised. Deal, Catherine agreed, allowing herself to be pulled inside. Mark watched from the kitchen doorway, a dish towel slung over his shoulder and a smile on his face. I see how it is. I'm just the pumpkin purchaser now. And the snack provider, Catherine added, crossing to give him a quick kiss. Don't forget that crucial role. As they set up newspapers on the dining table and laid out carving tools, Mark marveled at how naturally Catherine had integrated into their lives. She wasn't trying to replace Diane, she was creating her own place in their family, one that honored the past while building something new. Emma chattered excitedly about her costume plans and school projects, comfortable in the presence of both adults. When she accidentally spilled pumpkin seeds all over the floor, she looked up anxiously, but instead of frustration, she was met with laughter as both Mark and Catherine got on their hands and knees to help clean up. Later, after Emma had gone to bed, exhausted from the excitement and sugar, Mark and Catherine sat on the couch, her head resting on his shoulder. I have something to ask you, Mark said, his heart racing slightly. And I want you to know that you can say no, or that you need time, or whatever you're feeling. Catherine sat up, looking at him curiously. That's quite a preamble. Mark took a deep breath. Emma and I have been talking. About you. About us. Should I be worried? Catherine asked, only half joking. No, Mark assured her. But Emma pointed out that you spend almost all your free time here anyway, and that your apartment doesn't allow pets, which is, according to her, very sad. Mark pulled her close, relief and joy washing over him. Even though we come with pumpkin seeds on the floor and princess movies on repeat? Especially because of that, Catherine said, nestling against him. Though I reserve the right to establish a no-glitter policy. There are limits to my tolerance. They both laughed, and in that moment, Mark felt a sense of rightness that had been missing for so long. They weren't a perfect family, they were still figuring things out day by day, but they were theirs. 1 year later, on a brisk autumn morning, Mark stood in the hallway of their home, no longer just his and Emma's, but Catherine's too. The walls now held new photos alongside the old ones, Catherine and Emma building a snowman, the three of them at Emma's school play, a candid shot of Catherine and Mark laughing at something now forgotten. He was straightening his tie, a skill he'd finally mastered, when Emma appeared in her flower girl dress, twirling to make the skirt flare out. "How do I look, Daddy?" she asked, her eyes bright with excitement. "Like the most beautiful flower girl in the world," he answered truthfully. "Are you ready for your big job today?" Emma nodded solemnly. "I practiced throwing the petals with Ms. Patel yesterday. She said I'm a natural." "I have no doubt," Mark smiled, checking his watch. "We should get going. We don't want to be late." "Catherine says being exactly on time is boring," Emma informed him. "She says 5 minutes late is fashionable." "Well, today is one day when even Catherine would agree that on time is better than fashionable," Mark replied, helping Emma with her coat. They arrived at the small garden venue just as Catherine's car pulled up. Despite their agreement not to see each other before the ceremony, a tradition Catherine had insisted was charmingly old-fashioned, Mark couldn't help but watch as she stepped out, stunning in a simple cream dress that wasn't quite a traditional wedding gown but was perfect for her. Their eyes met across the parking lot, and Catherine smiled, that same smile that had first begun to thaw something frozen inside him 2 years ago when she'd offered him a lifeline instead of a termination. The ceremony was small, just as they'd wanted. Emma took her flower girl duties with utmost seriousness, carefully distributing rose petals along the garden path. Catherine's sister stood as her maid of honor, while Mark's college roommate served as best man. Mrs. Patel sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes, having become something of a surrogate grandmother to Emma over the years. When it came time for vows, Mark and Catherine had decided to write their own. Catherine went first, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "Mark, when I first met you, you were late, disheveled, and clearly hanging on by a thread," she began, prompting laughter from the guests who knew their story. "And yet, even then, I saw something in you worth fighting for. I didn't know then that I was fighting for my own happiness as much as yours." She turned slightly to include Emma in her gaze. "I promise to love you both with everything I have. To be patient when work is stressful, to laugh when the house is chaos, and to remember always that the most important deadlines are the ones that involve bedtime stories and family dinners." Mark swallowed hard, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. When it was his turn, he took a deep breath. "Catherine, you came into our lives like a whirlwind, organized, demanding, and absolutely terrifying," he said, earning another laugh. "You saw me at my worst and instead of walking away, you helped me find a better way forward. You fired me," he paused for effect, "and in doing so, gave me the chance to rebuild my life." He reached for Emma's hand, bringing her closer. "We're not offering you a perfect family. We're offering you our messy, complicated, wonderful life, with all its challenges and joys. I promise to love you through all of it, the late nights, the early mornings, and everything in between." Emma, not one to be left out, tugged on Catherine's dress. "Can I say something too?" The officiant nodded, smiling, and Emma stepped forward importantly. "I promise to pick up my toys most of the time," she announced, "and to only use glitter when Catherine's not home." This drew more laughter. "And I promise to love you forever and ever, even when you make me eat vegetables." Catherine knelt down, heedless of her dress, and hugged Emma tightly. "Those are the best promises I've ever heard," she whispered. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur, and soon they were pronounced married, sealing their vows with a kiss while Emma clapped enthusiastically. At the reception, as they shared their first dance, Mark held Catherine close. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Beyond words," she replied. "Though I'm still your boss at home, you know that, right?" Mark laughed. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Later, as the celebration continued around them, Mark found himself watching Catherine and Emma dancing together, both laughing as they attempted some complicated twirl. The sight filled his heart almost to bursting. Mrs. Patel appeared beside him, following his gaze. "Your Diane would be pleased," she said gently. "To see you both so happy." Mark nodded, a lump in his throat. I think so too. Life gives us second chances in the most unexpected ways, the older woman continued. The trick is to recognize them when they arrive, even if they come in the form of someone yelling, "You're fired," on your doorstep. Mark smiled at the memory that now held no pain, only the recognition of a beginning he hadn't been able to see at the time. Sometimes getting fired is the best thing that can happen to you. Indeed, Mrs. Patel agreed. Though perhaps don't put that on your anniversary cards. As the evening wound down, Mark, Catherine, and Emma stood together under twinkling garden lights, a family forged not from perfect circumstances but from the willingness to build something beautiful from life's challenges. Ready to go home? Mark asked, his arm around Catherine's waist, Emma's small hand in his. Home, Catherine repeated, smiling at both of them. Yes. I'm ready. 5 years later, Mark stood in the doorway of their expanded family home, watching as Catherine helped their 3-year-old son, James, build a tower of blocks while Emma, now 11, sat nearby reading a book about marine biology, her childhood fascination having evolved into a serious academic interest. The journey hadn't always been smooth. There had been adjustments as Catherine learned to navigate step-parenting, moments of grief when Emma would suddenly miss her birth mother, the challenges of integrating a new baby into their already established family. But through it all, they had faced each obstacle together, stronger for the understanding that had brought them together in the first place, that asking for help wasn't weakness but wisdom. Mark's phone buzzed with a text from his newest author, anxious about deadline extensions. As a senior editor now, working primarily from his home office, Mark had found a balance that allowed him to be both professionally fulfilled and present for his family. Catherine had continued to rise in her career as well, recently being named CEO of Westfield Publishing Group, her leadership style informed by the compassion and insight that had once saved Mark's career and changed his life. "Daddy, watch." James called, placing the final block precariously on top of his tower. "I did it." "Amazing job, buddy," Mark praised, crossing the room to join his family. Catherine looked up at him with a smile that still made his heart skip after all these years. "Crisis averted?" she asked, nodding toward his phone. "Just another nervous first-time author," Mark replied, sitting beside her. "Nothing I can't handle." Emma lowered her book. "Dad, can we go to the aquarium this weekend? I want to see the new cephalopod exhibit." "Still with the octopuses," Catherine teased. "Some things never change. They're the most intelligent invertebrates," Emma informed them seriously. "Did you know they can solve complex puzzles and recognize human faces?" "I did not," Mark said, exchanging an amused glance with Catherine. "But I'm sure you'll tell us all about it at the aquarium this weekend." As James abandoned his blocks to climb into Catherine's lap and Emma launched into a detailed explanation of octopus cognition, Mark felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. From the depths of grief and overwhelm, he had found his way to this moment, surrounded by love, supported and supporting in turn. He thought back to that rainy day when Catherine had stood on his doorstep, soaking wet and furious, finally at the end of her patience with his stubborn refusal to accept help. "You're fired," she had shouted, not knowing those words would be the beginning rather than the end. Sometimes life's harshest moments truly did lead to the greatest blessings. Sometimes getting fired was just the wake-up call needed to build a life beyond imagination. And sometimes, the boss who fires you becomes the love who saves you, not by doing the work for you, but by showing you how to ask for help when you need it most. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories about life's unexpected turns and second chances. Remember that sometimes our greatest struggles lead to our most beautiful beginnings, and that there's strength, not weakness, in reaching out for help when we need it most. What unexpected blessing has come from a difficult moment in your life? Share your story in the comments below, and let's remind each other that even our darkest days can lead to the brightest futures. As the sun set behind their suburban home, casting long shadows across the backyard where James chased fireflies and Emma sat sketching octopuses in her nature journal, Mark and Catherine stood side by side on the patio, fingers intertwined. "Do you ever think about how differently things could have turned out?" Mark asked, watching their children with quiet contentment. Catherine squeezed his hand. "Sometimes. If I'd been a different kind of boss. If you'd been too proud to accept the remote position. If we'd both been too afraid to try again. If you hadn't shown up at my door that day to fire me," Mark added with a smile. "My finest moment of professional frustration," Catherine laughed. "Though I maintain you deserved it at the time." "I absolutely did," Mark agreed. "Best thing that ever happened to me." As the evening deepened and they called the children in for dinner, their home filled with the comfortable chaos of family life, homework questions, stories from the day, plans for the weekend ahead. The photographs on the walls had multiplied over the years, chronicling their journey: Emma's school achievements, James's first steps, family vacations, quiet moments of everyday joy. In their bedroom that night, as Catherine reviewed publishing contracts and Mark edited manuscript pages, the comfortable silence between them spoke of a partnership built on understanding, respect, and love that had grown from the most unlikely beginning. "I was thinking," Catherine said, setting aside her work, "about taking the kids to visit my parents for spring break. Emma's been asking to see the tide pools again, and James is finally old enough to appreciate them." "Sounds perfect," Mark replied. "Though your father will probably still call me the guy you fired the entire time." "It's his favorite joke," Catherine smiled. "Besides, he's not wrong." Mark set his papers on the nightstand and turned to face her. 10 years ago, if someone had told me that the woman who fired me would become the center of my world, I'd have thought they were crazy. And if someone had told me that the disheveled, chronically late editor I inherited would become my husband and the father of my child, I'd have had them committed," Catherine countered, her eyes soft with affection. "We were quite the unlikely pair." "The best stories always are," Catherine said, leaning in to kiss him. "And ours is just getting started." As they turned out the lights and settled into each other's arms, the house quiet except for the occasional creak of settling foundations and the soft breathing of children dreaming down the hall, Mark reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from grief to growth, from isolation to connection, from firing to forever. Sometimes life's greatest gifts arrive disguised as its greatest challenges. Sometimes the door that seems to be closing is actually opening to a future brighter than you could have imagined. And sometimes, the person who appears to be your adversary becomes the love that saves you, not from the outside, but by helping you find the strength that was within you all along. Thank you for watching this heartfelt story of unexpected love and second chances. If you enjoyed, Single Dad Didn't Get His Boss Hints. Until she knocked on his door and finally yelled, "You're fired," please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more touching stories that remind us of the power of resilience, connection, and hope. Remember that even in your darkest moments, something beautiful may be waiting just around the corner. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how this story resonated with you or about a time when an apparent setback in your own life led to an unexpected blessing. Until next time, keep believing in second chances and the healing power of love.